So we live in possibly one of the most convenient times in human history. The food can reach our doorsteps in 20 minutes. We can call anyone on the other side of the world instantly. We can get our groceries delivered in 5 minutes. We have GPS, air conditioning, entertainment on demand, dating apps, productivity apps, meditations app, and anything that you can mention. And somehow we have the apps for reducing our anxiety that is caused to us by all these other apps. Think about it, our lives have become much more convenient, but because of all of this, have our minds become more peaceful? In fact, many of us are anxious most of the time that what if something is wrong or what if something goes wrong? And not just that, we're also anxious when things are going right because we are waiting for the other shoe to drop. We're anxious about our careers, our relationships, our health, our future, and whether we're doing enough or are we enough or not. And most importantly and sadly, whether everyone else is doing better than us. Then there's a loophole of other problems that whether we are living up to our potential, whether the other person is going to text us back. And sometimes we're even anxious without even knowing what we're really anxious about. So the question is, why are we more anxious than ever? And more importantly, what does a conversation that happened on a battlefield thousands of years ago have to do with the modern anxiety? So come learn psychology of Bhagavad Gita with me. And today, instead of studying just one verse at a time, we are going to study the psychology of anxiety from the perspective of Bhagavad Gita as explained by Krishna, so that it is relevant to our modern lives. So, the first problem is that we have become intolerant to any kind of discomfort. Let me ask you something and be honest with yourself. When was the last time that you were uncomfortable and you allowed yourself to be uncomfortable in that moment? Yeah, we don't do that anymore. We feel bored, we have our phone. We feel lonely, we have our phone. We feel anxious, we can distract ourselves with the phone. We feel sad, we can order food. If we are unsure about something, we can always Google the answer. And if someone doesn't reply, you can always check their last scene or check their Instagram, check whether they've viewed your story, check again and again and again. So, our problem is not simply that we experience discomfort. Because, see, let's be real, human beings have always experienced discomfort. The problem is that now, unfortunately, we have started believing that if we are uncomfortable, then something must be wrong. And Krishna addresses this very early on in the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 2 and verse 14, where the literal translation is that where Krishna is telling Arjun that we experienced heat and cold, happiness and distress, all of them arise and then go. They are temporary and learn to tolerate them. And I find the word that Krishna uses here very fascinating, titiksha, which is forbearance, which is basically the capacity to experience discomfort without immediately feeling the need or the urge to solve it or even to escape from it. And as a psychologist, I can of course say that this is very, very relevant because one of the most important skills we need in today's times is distress tolerance. And notice that Krishna does not say that Arjun, stop feeling uncomfortable. He doesn't say that pain is an illusion, just avoid it and be happy. He simply says that the experience will come and it'll stay for a bit and it'll go. So the question here for you is that can you stay present without allowing a temporary internal experience to control your entire life? Because think about it, the opposite of anxiety is not always necessarily calmness. Sometimes the opposite of anxiety is just having the capacity to say, I am uncomfortable right now, but I don't have to immediately fix it. Now, on to the second problem that our minds are constantly used to being pulled somewhere or the other. Now, imagine this, you've just woken up in the morning, your brain hasn't even started fully functioning yet, and the first thing you do is you pick up your phone. One message, three notifications, a bunch of notifications from apps. Somebody got married, somebody got promoted, someone proposed someone had a child, someone went to a great vacation in the Maldives, and someone is telling you that if you haven't built a six-figure business by 30, then you're a failure. And someone says that you need to calm down and slow down your life. Someone says work harder. Next says rest more, find love, be independent, build a career, travel the world, buy a house, don't get attached to material things, and all of this, and it's just 8:15 in the morning. Of course, your mind is going to be anxious. Before your eyes have fully opened, before your mind has even entered this world fully, you have consumed so much and all different kinds of information. And so, for this, Krishna explains something very important in chapter 2, verse 63 and 64. So, I'm just going to put the Sanskrit verses here, but honestly, these are the two of the most psychologically fascinating verses in Bhagavad Gita. Because what Krishna is doing here in these verses is he's explaining a chain reaction where you repeatedly contemplate something and the contemplation leads to attachment. Then attachment creates desire. And the desire, when you're frustrated, produces anger. So, do you see the loop? And then it doesn't stop there. Anger creates delusion, and delusion affects your memory and judgment until you're no longer in the state to discriminate among anything. And then the person falls. Now, let's think about the anxiety from the perspective of this chain. You see somebody doing better than you, and you keep thinking about it. You think that why am I not there yet? What am I not doing enough? And you become attached to a particular outcome. I need to achieve this no matter what. And the desire becomes so psychologically rigid that I need this thing to happen, otherwise, it means that I'm falling and I'm failing. And now, what happens is that the possibility of not getting all of that seems terrifying. And this is where your desire, which once was your goal, transforms into your full blown anxiety. And trust me, through this video, I'm not telling you that stop wanting things. I'm just telling you that the problem is not just that you desire things or that you have big goals in life or that you want to achieve something that probably someone else around you has achieved. The problem is that when you say to yourself that unless I can become this, unless I can achieve this, my world does not make sense. And that is an entirely different psychological experience from where you started with. And this is one place where I think that Bhagavad Gita adds something very fascinating to the conversation about anxiety. So, psychology asks us, if you've been to therapy, you'll know that what are you afraid of? And Krishna also asks us that what are you really attached to? If you see, both these questions are pretty similar because underneath all of that anxiety, there is an outcome that we have decided that we fully and absolutely need. And finally, the third problem is that we want peace without even training our mind completely for it. So we all want peace, and throughout this video, you've seen various things that how do we even treat our minds? We consume all kinds of information from the moment we wake up and to the moment we fall asleep. We are switching constantly between apps, we're switching constantly between tasks. Nothing around our day is ever stable. So we rarely ever sit in silence, and every day we expose ourselves to hundreds of opinions of other people. And it doesn't even have to be the opinions of people on your life, it can be opinions of so many people on anything in general. We compare ourselves to practically everything, thousands of lives, and then we have the audacity to sit at night and ask ourselves, why can I not switch off my brain? And then to try and get yourself sleepy, we start doom scrolling again. And so for this, Krishna says something extremely direct in chapter 2, verse 66. And the direct translation for that is that for one who doesn't have peace, how can they have happiness? So the complete teaching of this verse is that without having a disciplined intelligence and a regulated mind, there cannot be genuine contemplation. And without contemplation, there is absolutely no peace. And without peace, we come back, where is happiness? And this raises a very uncomfortable question that are we trying to create a happy life without even making our mind capable of experiencing happiness? Yeah, sit with that thought. Because see, throughout your life, you can keep improving your circumstances endlessly. Better salary, better relationships, better body, better house, better phone, and better everything else. But if our same restless mind keeps entering every single improved version of our life, don't you think that the whole experience will fundamentally change? And you take your mind everywhere. I'm a psychologist, I can tell you this for sure because I practice hypnotherapy as well, that you cannot just take away your thoughts. You cannot just make yourself forget anything. So you take your mind everywhere you go, to the work, to your family gatherings, to anywhere you're going. You take it on a vacation, you take it in a marriage, and even into a bigger house with better relationships. And sadly, this is why working on our external world without even fully understanding our internal world can only take us so far. So I know, okay, I've told you a lot about all of this, but then you might ask that, Malvika, so okay, what does a peaceful mind actually even look like? And this brings me to one of my most favorite metaphors from Bhagavad Gita, which is from chapter 2, verse 70. Krishna says that just like countless rivers enter an ocean, the ocean remains steady. And similarly, the persons in whom the desires enter without disturbing them actually attains peace. And notice something very important. Krishna is not saying that a peaceful person has no regrets or the peaceful person has no desires. Leave all the materialistic world behind. And I am not here to preach that either. What he's saying is that the rivers are still coming, the desires are still coming, the problems still arise, the emotions still arise, things will be chaotic at times, and the uncertainty will always arise from time to time. But the difference is the capacity of the ocean. And I think this is probably one of the biggest misunderstandings that we have about mental health. So many clients who come to me, and I'm sure most of you think that, okay, when one of my or most of my problems go away or they reduce, I'll finally be at peace. Well, I wish that was true, but unfortunately, it's not. So maybe the peace is not about solving all our external problems or increasing the quality of our life or improving various aspects of our life. It's about creating that capacity within us that can withhold all of these desires, problems without actually disturbing us. And I know it probably obviously sounds easier said than done. But the real question is should not be that how do I stop feeling anxious? Because sometimes the better question is how do I become psychologically spacious enough to simply be able to carry this anxiety without it consuming and becoming my entire identity. The ocean does not chase those countless rivers away. It doesn't panic when those rivers arrive and merge in the ocean. It contains them without losing itself. And that is a very different definition of peace. But then you might ask that what if my mind still doesn't listen to me? Because let's be real, our minds are probably against us most of the time. And even Arjun asked Krishna very nicely that, okay, you've told me all of this and it sounds great and all, but have you met my mind? In chapter 6, verse 34, Arjun says that the mind is restless, stubborn, and turbulent, and controlling it seems as difficult as controlling the wind. And this probably relates a lot to our modern world chaotic minds. And after that, Krishna says something very important. He does not dismiss Arjun that, oh, I have told you all of this now, and look, you're still worried. He says, yes, it is very difficult. Your mind cannot just suddenly be controlled. Your anxiety cannot just suddenly go away. And whatever I've told you about all the mental disciplines is not just going to be in action immediately just because you've listened to them properly. The mind is definitely difficult to control, but then he says that it is possible through abhyas and vairagya, which basically translates to practice and detachment. Not one motivational reel, not a 30-minute meditation session, not one morning routine that you do for 3 days and then forget about it. It's about practice repeatedly. And detachment, the ability to stop following every single thought that comes to your mind. Every single thought that comes to your mind is not necessarily true. Because think about it, we don't always listen to our parents or anyone else in our lives, but the moment something pops to our mind, we consider it as being absolutely true. And then we follow the trail of different questions, different scenarios, and it just keeps going on and on. And this is another important distinction that having a thought is not the same as receiving an instruction. So if your mind says, what if something goes wrong? What if that person abandons me? You don't have to chase that thought. You don't have to spend 3 hours creating imaginary scenarios. What if I fail? What if everything goes wrong for me? You can just simply notice the thought without organizing your entire life around it. And then Krishna gives us an actual method in chapter 6, verse 26, where Krishna says that whenever the restless mind wanders, bring it back. That's it. If it wanders, bring it back. It wanders again, bring it back. It keeps wandering, bring it back again and again. And back where? To the present moment. And I honestly love this teaching of Krishna because it doesn't say that if your mind wanders, then you failed, which is most of the people, even I at some point used to assume that while you're meditating, all your thoughts need to go away, otherwise, you're not doing it right. So, Krishna doesn't say that just because your mind wanders, you failed. Because the real thing is returning, which is the actual practice. If your mind goes into the future, bring it back. If it goes back to the past, bring it back. If it starts catastrophizing situations, bring it back. If it starts comparing, bring it back. If it starts replaying a conversation that happened 3 months ago at 2 a.m. in the middle of the night, bring it back. Again and again and again and again. And this is how you actually learn to train your mind. Not through violence, not through self hatred, not through setting impossible goals for yourself, not through just watching this video and feeling good that, okay, I should be able to do this now because it makes sense. And not even by screaming internally that, why am I like this? But it is through repeated practice and redirection. See, the choice is simple. Your mind can either be your friend or your enemy. The same mind that can think of everything going wrong can imagine so many possibilities. The same mind that can obsess about a single thing can also focus. And the same sensitivity that makes you feel overwhelmed can make you deeply perceptive about things. And so the goal is not to destroy your mind. You cannot stop your mind from thinking or overthinking because that's the only job of your mind. But you can decide to make a different relationship with it. And this is perhaps the most beautiful meeting point between psychology and Bhagavad Gita. Because psychology helps us understand our thoughts, our behavior, our nervous system, our patterns, our conditioning, our emotions, our cognition. And the Gita asks a completely different question: who is leading whom? Are you using your mind? Or is every thought, emotion, desire, and fear pulling you towards whatever it wants? So, why are we more anxious than ever? Maybe because we have a lot more information, we have a lot more convenience in life. And having all that information doesn't necessarily mean that we have a lot of wisdom. We, of course, have more stimulation, but a lot less stillness. We have more comfort, but then we have a lot less tolerance for discomfort. We have so many more choices, but less clarity. We have so many ways of controlling our environment. And therefore, there's even greater fear of things that we can't control. And perhaps the Bhagavad Gita's answer to anxiety is not to stop being anxious. It is something much more deeper. Learn to tolerate what is temporary. And try and watch out for what you repeatedly keep giving attention to. Try and understand how contemplation turns into attachment. So basically, stop expecting peace from an untrained mind. Like I've said a lot of times in this video, become an ocean rather than trying to stop every river that gets into you. And whenever your mind wanders, bring it back again and again and again and again. Because realistically, Krishna never promised Arjun a life without uncertainty. Instead, what he did was he taught him how to develop a mind that could act meaningfully and act in his favor, even in the middle of uncertainty. And maybe, well, no, actually, that is exactly what we need today. Not a life where nothing makes us anxious, but a mind that knows exactly what to do when the anxiety arrives because it will.